So I just saw this breaking news. Google's planning to ban crypto wallets from their app store unless they have federal licenses here in the US. They're throwing around those AML and KYC requirements I keep talking about. Here's the thing. If you're using a wallet that skips KYC or AML compliance, there's a good chance it's going to vanish if it doesn't have proper licensing. Same story with exchanges. You know how some exchanges actually brag about not doing KYC or AML? Well, if you've got assets sitting on those platforms, don't be surprised if they disappear along with the exchange. We're looking at a major bottleneck coming for crypto. I'm talking about 99% of it potentially disappearing once regulations really kick in. This is still early days, but it's already starting to happen. This gives you a preview of what's heading our way in the next few months. You've got to protect your crypto, grab a cold wallet, and store everything there. I always tell people if you're not into Decent, go with Ledger. I personally use both wallets for exactly this reason. And here's the kicker. Ripple isn't just knocking on the door anymore. They're sitting right inside the control room of global finance. Okay, so I stumbled across this thread and my jaw literally dropped. We're talking about the partnership that just flipped the entire game. Ripple and Eastnets just shook hands, and honestly, this is the kind of move that makes you go, holy crap, it's actually happening. Here's the deal with Eastnets. They're basically your golden ticket into SWIFT territory. You know SWIFT, right? That ancient clunky system that's been running global payments forever. Well, Eastnets just handed Ripple the keys to the kingdom. We're talking direct access to SWIFT, ISO 2022, and get this, over 800 banks and central banks. This isn't some side door entry. This is walking through the front entrance like you own the place. But wait, it gets juicier. They've literally woven DLTO right into the fabric of Payment Safe. Eastnet's Payment Safe is now powered by Ripple Tech, which means those painful 3 to 5 day SWIFT transfers, they just got nuked. We're talking instant settlement that makes the old system look like sending messages by carrier pigeon. And here's where my mind gets blown. Ripple isn't just playing in the payment sandbox anymore. They're in the big leagues now, rubbing shoulders with CBDC architects, whispering in policymakers' ears, hanging out at World Economic Forum power lunches. They're not just adapting to the future of finance, they're writing the damn blueprint. This isn't some maybe someday story anymore. Remember when everyone used to say one day Ripple might replace SWIFT? Well, surprise, it's not coming. It's here. As Rosie Rios put it perfectly, the train didn't just leave the station. It's already halfway to its destination. BNY Mellon just signed on with Open Eden as their investment manager and custodian for tokenized T-bill U.S. Treasury funds. We're watching TradFi and DeFi shake hands in real time. But hold up. Who else is Open Eden playing around with? Oh yeah, that's right, Ripple. So here's what's cooking. Open Eden's taking U.S. Treasury bills and tokenizing them straight onto the XRP ledger. Now here's where your brain should start tingling. Once you've got these tokenized T-bills sitting there, you're going to need to actually move them around, right? Well, how do you think that happens? Boom, through the XRP ledger. And guess what makes that whole dance possible? XRP. So this insight from Pumpius really got me thinking. What if Ripple was never actually the little guy fighting against the big bad US government? What if they were working with them this whole time? All that lawsuit drama, the whole David versus Goliath narrative, maybe it was just brilliant theater to let Ripple quietly build the new financial infrastructure while flying under the radar here at home. And honestly, it makes total sense when you think about it. While everyone was watching this supposed legal battle with the SEC, what was Ripple actually doing behind the scenes? They went completely global, building payment rails everywhere except the US. Right from the start, their technology was clearly built for big institutions, not crypto hobbyists. We're talking near zero fees, instant settlements, ISO compliance before anyone even required it. This wasn't some scrappy garage startup trying to disrupt things. This was serious infrastructure designed to actually replace SWIFT, not just compete with it. Look at who they're partnered with. Federal Reserve pilot programs, central banks in places like Bhutan, Palau, Montenegro, major payment corridors throughout the Middle East and Asia, connections to defense-linked banks like BNY Mellon. That's not the profile of some rogue fintech company. That's government-sanctioned expansion. And someone definitely had to greenlight all of this. While the headlines were screaming about Ripple being in trouble, they quietly signed over 1,700 contracts and NDAs with massive global financial players. Every time they, quote, fled to another country, it wasn't really running away, it was methodically laying groundwork to eventually bring those rails back home. It's classic controlled opposition. Make your guy look like the victim while he's actually executing the plan. So here's where it gets really wild. They let Ripple build freely overseas. Then when the time is right, they flip the script and reveal the technology was essentially the government's plan all along. By that point, the rails are already built everywhere, so what are you going to do? Look at RLUSD, Ripple's stablecoin pilot. It's totally US compliant, designed specifically for institutional custody, and plugs straight into the XRP ledger. Once they flip that switch, RLUSD becomes the domestic bridge asset while XRP handles all the global settlements. The secrecy makes perfect sense, though. If people knew from day one that the US was quietly building the foundation for a blockchain-based reserve system, there would have been massive pushback. Way easier to make it look like some scrappy private company fighting for freedom than to admit the state was rebuilding the dollar rails in real time. But here's where it gets really interesting. There's this thing called DNA Protocol, which is apparently a US-linked genomic data project built right on the XRP ledger. Think about it. If these rails can move money, they can move any asset, including biological data. Tokenizing DNA basically means controlling not just finance, but identity itself. When you put all the pieces together, it's pretty mind-blowing. Ripple builds global rails under this whole opposition cover story. The US quietly makes sure everything's domestically compatible, then tokenization expands from just money to real-world assets to actual identity control. The whole power structure shifts from the traditional banking system straight to the XRP ledger. So Ripple isn't just working with the US government. Ripple basically is the US government's blockchain division. The lawsuit was pure theater, the global expansion was always the real mission, and the ledger is looking like the new digital constitution. This timeline from 2022 to 2025 really does seem to line up perfectly with this theory. Now that everything's basically in place worldwide, it definitely feels like we're approaching go time. And you're right, people have been connecting these dots for years. They were already talking about Ripple and the digital dollar back in 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, but it seemed like everything got put on pause until the timing was just right. You're absolutely right. XRP was always designed for financial institutions, not everyday retail investors. Ripple's entire business model revolves around the XRP ledger, and financial institutions have to integrate their systems directly with that ledger to use Ripple's services. The protocol just wasn't built to interface with regular consumers and businesses. It doesn't even control retail pricing. BNP Paribas actually confirmed this in their own documentation, stating flat out that the XRP ledger is an institutional protocol. XRP simply isn't meant for retail investors. Honestly, I don't think we were ever supposed to be holding this cryptocurrency. It just happened that early on, XRP got listed on exchanges and people started buying it up. But Ripple's whole strategy has always been about institutional adoption from day one. The crazy thing is, we basically beat the institutions to the punch. That's legitimately a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and a lot of people are going to get incredibly wealthy because of this timing accident. That's exactly why you want to buy XRP at these current prices while you still can. Because eventually, you're going to get completely priced out. And honestly, I think that time is coming pretty fast. Now, what's really interesting is what crypto mom Hester Peirce just said about the SEC not waiting for Congress to act on crypto regulation. She's basically saying the agency can accomplish a lot without waiting for lawmakers, and they want to keep pushing forward with or without congressional approval. They want to get a ton of groundwork laid right now. I actually love hearing that because this time around we've got a pro-crypto SEC. So the more things the SEC can get locked in place before these bigger laws come through, the better everything gets positioned. I think this means everything's going to happen way sooner than people expect. The whole timeline just shifted up again. The SEC wants to open crypto up to retail investors. Let me play you this clip.
Let's talk a little bit about that EO. So it instructs the Department of Labor and the SEC to adjust their rules and regulations to allow those retirement accounts to invest in private assets, to invest in crypto, or at least to allow it. How will the SEC approach this? What does that checklist look like?
Katie, it's great to be here. I think we've already started that process of opening the private markets to retail and thinking about ways that we can get them access in a way that's diversified, professionally managed, and consistent with their investing timeframes. And so I think we'll just continue with that work.
Appreciate that context. So as we continue on and as you approach this Talk us through some of the potential risks that you're thinking about, because certainly a lot of folks on Wall Street and elsewhere have been anticipating these rule changes, but there's also a lot of concern, too, about putting what are risky assets in retirement accounts.
Yes, I mean, I think those are legitimate concerns. What we've seen, of course, is that the public markets are dominated by several large companies, and also companies are waiting longer to go public. And so we're looking for a way for retail to get earlier access to the growth of companies. And so that's really the goal of it.
Exactly. They want to give retail investors the upper hand over institutions. And honestly, that's brilliant. But like you said, this already happened in crypto years ago. They really should have done this way back when. If they hadn't been so anti-crypto for so long, we probably would have brought tons more retail investors into the space already. But hey, better late than never that they're finally realizing retail deserves first mover advantage on certain things. Now, this is really interesting. Over $60 million worth of XRP just left the biggest Korean exchange in one massive transfer. What's wild is that on-chain mapping shows this transaction hit a receiving address and then immediately branched out into multiple smaller sub-wallets. That's classic behavior when an exchange is gearing up for periods of heavy trading activity. So are they expecting even more action coming out of the Korean market? Korea absolutely loves XRP, like they're obsessed with it. I think once the price really starts moving, you're going to see some serious FOMO coming out of Korea. Maybe they're already positioning ahead of that, getting everything ready for what's about to hit. It makes you wonder, where did this whole XRP army even come from?
XRP, Brad Garlinghouse has done an amazing job of creating. And I asked him a few times, I was like, where does this XRP army come from? And he said, I'm not even sure. Like, they care about this thing. I mean, when they went through that lawsuit, this guy, Doug Deaton, what was it, not Doug, who was the guy, Deaton? The lawyer, then he ran for...
John Deaton, yeah.
John Deaton.
Yeah, he was on the show.
That guy was literally tweeting 9 times a day, fighting this case in court. He didn't even know the guys at Ripple originally. This was part of his community, and he thought this was an injustice done to his community. And so I think one of the things that crypto has added to investing in general is the idea that community is valuable, right? Look at Tesla or Palantir. They're stocks. We call them meme stocks from a memic value. It's community. Mm-hmm. Find me one person in the world that says, I'm an Oracle guy, right? I'm an Oracle. I'm part of the Oracle army. Doesn't exist. No one's got an Oracle tattoo, even though Oracle's one of the most amazing companies out there. Larry Ellison's the second richest man in the world.
Right.
Equities weren't communities. Right? Crypto brought this idea of community, and it's coming from this breakdown in trust. And therefore, they can be just as passionate about CryptoPunks, the CryptoPunk community. Listen, do I think they'll all have the same lasting power as Bitcoin? No. But I've been so freaking wrong on how long some of them have lasted, right? XRP is still the number 3 token. Their people care about it. And when I say care about it, they are choosing to take their hard-earned dollars that they make as a salesperson or as a garbage man or as a chef or as a computer engineer, and they're storing that value in a community, right? In the Bitcoin community, we're storing it on this blockchain that is really guarded by this complex group of miners, right? We store our wealth in this thing, but it's because we're trusting in the community.
Digital asset investor totally nailed it with that comment. They're completely baffled by anything that wasn't manufactured by the Wall Street PR machine. You know, the same machine behind Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana. That's just how things have always been done in their world. So when they see something else starting to gain real momentum organically, they immediately try to dismiss it. It's always the same line. Well, it's never going to replace Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to be around forever. I mean, come on. I honestly don't know if Michael Novogratz just doesn't understand what's about to happen or if he's deliberately playing dumb. Because if you can't see a completely new financial system coming together when everything's already being put in motion right in front of your face, you'd have to be totally blind to it. You'd have to be so blinded by Bitcoin that you can't see the bigger picture. Here's the thing, Bitcoin is not going to be moving the world's money. These utility-driven cryptocurrencies are going to be the real value movers of the future. And when that shift happens, their precious